Hello everyone, Just Podcast TV is here. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified on new contents.
Episode 133. Gifts. It was a stretch of soft sand, so it's easy to dig a grave. James quickly dug a deep hole and then buried the body of the late Martin McClure. The storm would erase any traces of his work. In this way, the world's most wanted assassin, the harvester of lives who once walked in the darkness, also quietly disappeared into the darkness. When he was done, James stood in the rain with a cold smile. "Pass a message to your brothers. Tell them to come and find me," he said to the man buried in the sand. Then he turned around and disappeared up the shoreline. The rain stopped the next day. The sun broke out, causing the morning air to be especially fresh. Everything returned to normal. The streets outside James's hotel were alive with activity, but no one knew that in the darkness last night, something unimaginable had happened. "Sir, are you going to leave with the gems just like that?" In the living room of his villa, Dirka seemed distressed. James had given the 3 precious gemstones to Vanessa, Katie, and Krista seemingly without a thought. At first, Dirka didn't intend to ask about it, but he couldn't hold it in. James didn't say anything. He just nodded. Dirka was still worried. "I think you should seal the gems in this glass box. It is not ordinary glass. It's bulletproof glass that I specially ordered." "No need," James said confidently. "I think we're good." As long as he was there, the gems would not be in danger. Or it could be said that wherever he was would be absolutely safe simply because of his presence. Then James made a request. "Dirka, would you please bring us some paper and a pen?" The old man found the request odd, but he went to the study and brought back a legal pad and a crosspen. James jotted down some words on the top sheet of the pad, then signed it, had Krista witness it, and handed the paper to Dirka. It read, "I, James Tucker, transfer ownership and all rights to the Vada Mandri Sapphire Company to Mr. Dirka Raharasan." Dirka read the paper and was shocked. He hurriedly handed it back and said, "No, Mr. Tucker, the company is yours. If you try to return it to me, I will be extremely ashamed." James shook his head and said, "Please listen to what I have to say. I'm giving the company back to you because it's your life's work. I think you should continue to run it. Secondly, I have solved the problems you and I discussed in my own way. You don't have to worry about any trouble coming to your door. As for me keeping the 3 gems, just treat it as a little compensation for me. This way you won't feel guilty about taking back the company." Dirka tried to protest, but James cut him off. "That's my decision," he said, "but I have some advice for you. After I leave Vadamandri, you have to report the 3 gems as stolen. It's best to alert the authorities. The bigger the commotion, the better. This way your family will be safe and sound. Do you understand?" Dirka shook his head and said, "I do understand, but won't it bring you a lot of trouble? The Dark Abyss is not going to just let this go." James gave a confident laugh. "Let me worry about the Dark Abyss. You worry about running a profitable company." With that, he gave a slight bow to Dirka as a farewell, then stood up to leave the villa. "Wait!" It was Dirka. "I deeply appreciate your gift," he said, "but I want you to accept a gift in return. After this company is back to normal, I will give you 20% of the shares. At the end of every fiscal year, I will transfer the net profit to you." James was pleased with this generous offer. Once again, he did not need to do anything to generate income. He was really too lucky. He knew he didn't need the money, but he also knew he couldn't refuse without shaming the dignified old man. He said, "I will accept your kindness. However, I only agree to accepting 5% of the shares." Then he led the ladies out the door. Dirka and Durham watched them leave. Only then did Dirka mutter, "He is an unpredictable man." James did not take Durham's car, but instead arranged his own transportation. The staff of the Vadamandri branch of East Ocean Maritime had called and said that their yacht was repaired and restocked. In the taxi on the way to the marina, he turned to Vanessa, Krista, and Katie. "Ladies," he said, "do you like the gems you're wearing?" Their replies were not surprising. Of course I do. It's gorgeous. I love it. James laughed. Just think of them as a souvenir of our world trip. Besides, he added with a naughty smile, I know how much women love jewelry. Maybe I'll get lucky with one of you. Krista's face turned red when she heard what he said. But she could only sputter the one word before becoming too embarrassed to continue. Vanessa's eyes lit up, and she reacted instantly. James, I didn't expect you to say such dirty words. Katie was also astonished. You jerk, she said. She felt that he had taken advantage of them with the gemstones. James knew he screwed up with this lame attempt at humor. He coughed dryly and said, Okay, I said the wrong thing. I'm sorry. The ladies were still pissed. Vanessa and Katie each took one of his ears and pinched it hard. Ouch! Hey, I said I was wrong. Krista quickly stepped in. Vanessa, Katie, enough. As the oldest and most worldly of the three, Krista still had a subtle position of authority. As soon as she snapped at them, Vanessa and Katie let go of his ears. James touched his ears and let out a pathetic moan of pain. It immediately changed the mood in the cab. The three women took him into their arms at the same time. Feeling the softness of their embrace, James settled in for the rest of the ride to the marina. The taxi driver in front discreetly watched all of this in the rearview mirror. He couldn't figure out if he was envious of James or hated him. Probably both, he decided. James signed off on the last bit of paperwork with the East Ocean Maritime staff. They stepped onto the yacht and were amazed. It looked brand new. The check-in didn't have a time limit, so he planned to travel slowly and enjoy life. He steered the yacht south at a leisurely pace, circumventing Cape Sainte Marie, then up the west coast of Madagascar before arriving at Morindava on the western grassland. Episode 134, Visitor in the Night. The grasslands in the west of Madagascar stretched as far as the eye could see. It was the widest and rarest savanna on the planet. It looked especially impressive from afar. They arrived at the world-famous Avenue of the Baobabs just as the sun was setting. The tall silhouettes of the baobab trees on the horizon were spectacular under the flaming red sky. The women began to chirp happily and take pictures. James did not really like taking photos, preferring to fully experience the moment without distractions. He walked to a thick baobab tree and looked up. It was close to 60 feet tall. It was one of the most remarkable and peculiar trees he'd ever seen. Earlier in the day, they'd met a local on this country road who spoke English. He told them a legend about the baobab tree. It was said that when the world was young, the baobab tree was especially tall, growing up into the sky and offending God. Furious at such insolence, the heavenly deity pulled it up and placed it upside down into the ground. He never expected that the tree with tenacious vitality would actually survive and achieve its wondrous beauty. As James was admiring the thick baobab tree at close range, Vanessa rushed over. "James," she said, "quick, come and take pictures with us." "You know I don't like taking pictures," he replied. Vanessa ignored his stubbornness and hugged his arm. "But you're so handsome," she said, her words as sweet as honey. "You don't take pictures? What a waste." In the end, James couldn't refuse her, so he let her lead him over to the others like a good sport. It wasn't long before he regretted it. This was not about him taking pictures with them. It was clearly about him laboring as a temporary photographer for a few women. They wanted him to take pictures of them smiling. They asked him to take pictures of them jumping. They wanted him to take pictures of them in dramatic poses. James quickly grew tired of snapping photos. It didn't help that one of them inevitably despised the shot he took and had him redo it again and again to her satisfaction. The sky gradually darkened. James randomly chose one of the many modest hotels lining the country road for them to spend the night. After a simple dinner, they lay out on the grass beside a baobab tree and looked at the stars. James was content. The prolonged photo shoot aside, the day was definitely one worth remembering for the rest of his life. As James and the women gazed at the stars in Morondava, a lone figure appeared on the beach in Vadomandri. She came out of nowhere, as if squeezed out of the dark sky. She wasn't tall, and she seemed almost frail. She wore a black veil over her face, making it impossible to see her features clearly. She looked like a ghost. She just stood there quietly, as if carefully smelling the scent in the air. After 5 minutes, she suddenly raised her head and walked decisively in one direction. She stopped after only 10 steps. Then, with a flick of her wrist, a shovel appeared in her hand. She began to dig in the sand. In a short 3 minutes, a corpse appeared in front of her. After seeing the face of the body, she took out a cigarette, lit it, and inserted it into the sand. Then she lit another cigarette. She took a deep drag, then began speaking to the corpse as if it were still alive. I never would have thought that the famous Martin McClure's life would end this way. Although in our line of work, fate has long been decided. But this death is too unjust. She stared at the lifeless face below her. Don't worry, she said. If God did not give you your dignity, I will. The woman was the foremost female assassin in the world. She was known only as the Black Widow. She had worked with McClure in the past, and the two of them had a good relationship. A few days ago, after she had lost contact with him, she traced him to eastern Madagascar, then to Vadomandri. But she did not expect to find his cold corpse here. The assassin did not shed tears, nor did she believe in tears. But at this moment, the Black Widow was sad and angry. When she extinguished her cigarette, her hands that had killed countless people actually trembled a little. She picked up the shovel and reburied McClure's corpse. She did not say another word. A few minutes later, she wiped away all traces of her presence and disappeared into the night. The beach returned to its calm state. It was as if no one had ever been there. After touring the rural roads of Morondava and its famous Baobab trees, James brought the ladies to Antananarivo, the capital city. Madagascar was always known for its magnificent natural environment, a paradise of plants and animals. For decades, however, it was among the poorest countries in Africa. In the 21st century, tourism, especially ecotourism to places of natural beauty, had increased at a steady pace. Madagascar became known as a prime destination, and it developed rapidly. Although it was not completely rid of poverty, it was much better than before. They arrived in Antananarivo at dusk. Looking at the colorful houses and crowded streets, James was reminded of Turkey. If not for the lack of grand mosques, he would have thought they'd arrived in Istanbul. James led the three beauties on a whirlwind tour of the city. The group visited the old Queen's Palace and the splendid Lake Anasi, wandered on a Lakely market, enjoyed the local delicacies, and generally had a great time. In the dark night, outside the wall of a seaside villa in Vadomandri, a figure lurked in the shadows. Light as a cat, it jumped onto the wall and quietly landed in the yard. A few minutes later, a cold blade pressed against Dirka's throat as he lay in bed. Dirka feared death like any normal person, but at this moment, he was unusually calm. He just spread his hands and closed his eyes, accepting his fate. He knew very well that his villa was covered by scores of security cameras and intruder alarms inside and out. Yet this person was able to sneak into his bedroom without a sound and put a blade to his throat. He realized that fierce struggles or begging for mercy would be useless. At the very least, he intended to die with dignity. A hoarse female voice suddenly sounded in his ear. You are indeed a brave man. No wonder he was unwilling to make a move on you. He knew he wouldn't get any valuable information. Dirka was surprised by the voice. He did not expect the killer in front of him to be a woman, and he realized from the earlier work of his private investigators that she must be Martin McClure's accomplice, the infamous Black Widow. After James left Vadamandri, Dirka had listened to his advice and reported to the police that the Angel's Wings and its companion gemstones, Tears of the Sea and Earth's Little Heart, had been stolen. In addition, he also leaked the news to reporters, which put the story of the theft in the national headlines. It was a huge sensation. The Black Widow had also heard the news. Now she had two mysteries to contend with: the missing gemstones and the death of her friend. Before reburying him, the Black Widow had checked McClure's corpse. She was sure that his fatal injury was caused by his own knife. In other words, he had died by his own hand. But Martin McClure was a man of iron self-discipline. He never would have committed suicide. Even if he did, it would have been impossible for him to bury himself. She did not discover any clues on the beach, but there was no doubt her friend had died at the hands of a powerful opponent. She needed information, which was why she was in Dirka's bedroom tonight. To relax him and get him to cooperate, she put away the crescent blade. "Speak," she hissed. "If you have something useful for me, I won't need to kill you." Dirka's gun was in a drawer less than 10 inches from his bed, but he was not stupid enough to go for it. He knew that this killer would end his life before he ever got his hand on it. Instead, he began speaking, saying each word clearly. "The gems were protected by a high-definition camera. The security footage shows that it was a man and he was about 6 feet tall. He somehow gained access to the stones and left without leaving behind any clues. He had his face covered. From the looks of it, he was a master thief." The Black Widow frowned under her veil. "The surveillance video," she said. "Is it still here?" She did not have any hope it was. After all, the police were already involved. Surely they'd confiscated all of the security footage. "No, the police took it as evidence," Dirka said. "But if you want to see it, I could think of a way to get you a copy." The Black Widow was not stupid enough to believe his words. With the police in possession of the video, she did not want to take the risk of exposing herself to them. She raised her hand and the crescent blade flashed. Dirka closed his eyes. A gust of wind swept through the bedroom. When he opened his eyes again, he was the only one in the room. The Black Widow had disappeared without a trace. Dirka slowly sat up in bed. His back was drenched in sweat. "It worked," he murmured to himself. "Mr. Tucker was right." He realized something else too. The Black Widow did not kill him because she was merciful. Rather, she was afraid of attracting the attention of the authorities. Dirka was now a public figure standing in the middle of the storm. The media, the police, the citizenry captivated by the exciting story. All eyes were on him. If she killed him, she would only cause trouble for herself. It was just as Mr. Tucker had predicted. Dirka was terrified by his foresight. Who was this James Tucker, really? Episode 135. In the Nick of Time. After the wonderful tour of Antananarivo, James and the women returned to the yacht and set sail again. Their destination was Cape Town. Located at the southernmost tip of the African continent, on the western spur of the Cape of Good Hope, Cape Town was one of 3 capital cities of South Africa. It was not a random destination. James's next mission spot was the Cape Nation. James's next mission spot was the Cape of Good Hope. James piloted the yacht through the Mozambique Channel and along the southeastern coast of Africa. Along the way, he enjoyed every minute of his time on the sea with the 3 beauties. Ever since they'd escaped death on the deserted island, their understanding of life seemed to have deepened. Now, every minute was precious to them. While off the eastern coast of South Africa near Durban, James received a call from Andy Fremont. His old friend reported that the eco-resort project in his home country was in full swing and was estimated to be completed in another 6 months. The prospects for increased tourism and good-paying jobs were excellent. Andy asked James to return home as soon as possible. He really wanted him to participate in the ribbon-cutting ceremony. James said he'd do his best, though he couldn't help think about the expression on his parents' faces when he arrived with not just Vanessa, but Krista and Katie as well. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. When the first ray of sunlight began to warm the deck of the yacht, a beautiful metropolis on the shore of the sea emerged in front of their eyes. From the helm, James said softly, "Cape Town, I'm here." Just as James was pulling the yacht into the port of Cape Town, a figure wearing a black veil stepped out of the arrivals terminal at the Cape Town International Airport. A large port like Cape Town naturally had a branch of East Ocean Maritime. James had already made contact with the staff there through the ever-resourceful Stephen Leland. With their capable welcome, James and the ladies entered the country without a hitch. After a delicious breakfast, they took a taxi to the address given to him by the system for the West Group. In the center of Cape Town, at the top of a 30-story building, a middle-aged man sat quietly. It was the tourist James had met on Blaha Island, who had treated him like a movie star. His name was Samkelo Dlamini. He had been sitting here all night. Normally, people up on the roof were either getting some fresh air or enjoying the sights of the city from the high vantage point. Samkelo was there to commit suicide by jumping off the building. It was not that he wanted to kill himself. He loved this world very much. He had a beautiful wife and a good and sensible daughter. He wanted to kill himself because lately everything seemed to have gone against him. Not only did his gold mine go bankrupt, he also carried a huge personal debt that he was afraid he would never be able to repay. He sighed. He did not want to die. However, he did not dare to imagine what his life would be like in the future. He might as well die right here, right now. But then he thought of his wife and daughter, and how they would suffer. If not for that last bit of warmth in his heart, he would have jumped off the building last night. He slowly walked to the edge of the roof, looking at the familiar and beautiful city. His eyes were filled with despair. "Look, someone's going to jump off the roof!" On the crowded streets below, someone had noticed him and shouted in surprise, immediately attracting the attention of other pedestrians. Everyone looked up. People began talking and shouting at once. "Don't do it! Somebody call the police! Quick, call an ambulance!" Some people placed calls to emergency services to report the potential jumper. Others took out their phones and began videoing, preparing to record the horror that might occur. In front of the man on the ledge, there was a sign. It read, "West Group." Soon, police and ambulance sirens could be heard. The arriving police officers quickly herded the crowd to a hastily created safety zone. Working as fast as they could, they inflated a large air pad on the sidewalk. A team of negotiation experts went to the top floor of West Group as fast as they could. The entire street was boiling with excitement because of Samkelo. In a taxi, James was thinking about what he wanted to say when it was announced at the shareholders' meeting that he was the new chairman of West Group. Vanessa, Krista, and Katie enjoyed the scenery of the foreign city as they drove. In no time, the taxi arrived at their destination. It was the West Group building. As soon as he got out of the cab, James saw that the streets were full of people, and he could tell right away that something was up. Today wasn't a festival, and there was no concert scheduled for downtown as far as he knew. "This isn't right," he said. "Why are there police cars and an ambulance here?" Then he saw the huge air cushion below the West Group building. Now he realized the seriousness of the situation. As they joined the crowd behind the police barricade, Krista asked what was going on. It was the roof of the West Group headquarters, she was told. Someone wanted to jump. When James heard that, he felt awful. On the day he was slated to take over the company, someone was going to jump off the building? He didn't know what kind of liability insurance the company carried or how much money he would have to pay after this guy committed suicide. It was not an auspicious start to his tenure as chairman. James turned around and told the women he had an urgent matter to attend to. Without another word, he broke through the cordon and went straight to the building entrance. He was stopped by two young policemen. "I'm sorry," one of them said. "There's a special situation here. You can't enter for the time being." "Officer, I have an urgent matter inside," James said. "Can you make an exception?" "I'm sorry, but no. We are dealing with the emergency as best we can." James certainly understood their position, but he was in a hurry to go upstairs. He did not have time to explain to the policeman why. He hurried back to the cordon and had a brief, hushed conversation with Krista. Then he returned to the entrance and lowered his head and body. In the blink of an eye, when he stood up again, he was behind the two policemen. "Where is he?" the second officer said. But right then, Krista popped in front of them with a sweet smile on her face. Her beauty instantly attracted their attention. "Officers, can you please tell me what's going on?" she asked. The woman was beautiful, but the policemen were still vigilant and had a job to do. "Ma'am, this is an emergency situation. Please move back behind the barricade," the first cop said. Then he thought of the bloke who'd just been talking to them. He looked around, but the guy was gone. On the roof of the West Group building, the police negotiation experts and a handful of West Group executives were gathered nearby. Because the jumper was standing only inches away from the ledge, he was in a very dangerous position. In order to not provoke him, no one dared approach until they had a firm plan. The company execs had identified the man as Samkello Dlamini. He was a manager in West Group's gold mining division. It was decided to send out a familiar face first, Raymond Martin, the company's biggest shareholder. He was an older man in his 60s, with the close-cropped white hair typical of an ultra-rich corporate titan. "Listen to me, Samkello," he called out. "Come over here. Let's have a talk. You are a young and capable boss. There is nothing that can't be solved." Samkello had been quiet the entire time. However, as soon as Raymond finished speaking, he began yelling. "You are such a hypocrite, Ray. The reason why I'm up here is because of you. When I'm dead, this matter will be investigated, and it won't look good for you." This instantly attracted the attention of the negotiation experts who were still trying to understand the situation. It made them realize that something must have happened in the company to drive this guy to the edge. Raymond's expression changed when he heard that. He shifted uneasily and said, "What are you talking about? What does killing yourself have to do with me?" Samkello laughed wildly. "You old fox, God knows what you did. To be honest, I've been quite scared until now. But now that I see that you're scared, I'm not afraid anymore. Because after I die, you will also go to hell." It was obvious that he had lost control of his emotions. The situation was quickly getting out of hand. "Samkello, wait." Just as he was about to jump, he heard a slightly familiar voice. He turned and looked. It was the film star he'd met in Madagascar.